Arizona Territory, 1890. The desert sun was already sinking behind the jagged red cliffs when the auction gates were thrown open. Dust swirled in the dry evening air as men poured into the open yard, cowboys with cracked boots, traders with sharp eyes, and gamblers smelling of whiskey and greed. Their laughter was loud, forced, and cruel, as if they needed the noise to hide something ugly inside them. In the far corner of the wooden pen stood a woman, not moving, not speaking. She was Apache. Her black hair fell in tangled waves down her shoulders, dusty yet proud. Her wrists were tied with thick rope, the skin beneath red and raw. Her dress, once beautifully woven by her tribe, hung torn and faded, telling the final story of a people now scattered or dead. No one called her by name. To these men, she was not a person. She was, lot number 7. The auctioneer climbed onto the platform, wiping sweat from his neck with a dirty handkerchief. He grinned when he saw the crowd growing. Profit always made him smile. The more desperate the men, the higher the bids. In desperation hung in the air thick as heat. "Gentlemen," he shouted, slapping the wooden railing. "You're in for a rare prize tonight." The men chuckled, nudging one another like boys at a circus. "She don't look rare," one man muttered. "Looks like trouble." The auctioneer laughed loudly. "Trouble brings money, friend." The Apache woman did not flinch. Her dark eyes stayed fixed straight ahead, not on the men, beyond them. Somewhere far beyond the fences. Somewhere memory still lived. Only days before, she had stood in a valley filled with smoke and screams. The soldiers had arrived with boots and bullets. Her people had run. Her mother's hand had slipped from hers in the chaos. Her father fell with blood on his chest and his mouth open, calling her name that no one else would ever speak again. She survived by hiding beneath a burning wagon, ash coating her face like war paint. When night came, she ran until the stars fell asleep. But hunger and exhaustion are enemies no warrior can defeat alone. She collapsed days later near a broken trading route. White men found her. They did not offer water. They offered chains. Back at the auction yard, the first man stepped forward. $10. He shouted, laughing. The auctioneer shook his head dramatically. "Gentlemen, not for a woman like this. Look at her strength. Look at her fire. Fire." As if her suffering were entertainment. 15. Another voice called. 20. The numbers rose like a game. To her, they sounded like falling stones, not words, not money, just pieces of her life being torn away. She did not cry. Not now. Cry was for the mountain. Cry was for the river that had raised her. Cry was for the father who taught her the sky's language. Not for men who used laughter like knives. As bids grew, so did the cruelty. "She looks like she'd bite," one man sneered. "Good," another replied. "I like a wild one." The auctioneer laughed. "A spirited one, indeed. Might take a strong man to break her." The woman lifted her head then. Slowly, deliberately. Her eyes met the crowd, not pleading. Not weak. Burning. A few men shifted uncomfortably. For the briefest moment, the yard went quiet. Then the auctioneer, nervous, raised his voice. "Do I hear 30? 30? Someone barked. 35. She closed her eyes. Inside her mind, the voices of her people rose like drums. Her grandmother's hands brushing her hair. Her brother's laughter near the river. The crackling of fire. The smell of roasted corn. The songs of women before dawn. Not this. Never this. And then, a voice spoke from the back. 50. It was not loud. It was not proud. It was calm. The yard turned. A man stood alone near the wooden fence. He was tall, thin, dressed plainly. No gold buckle. No whiskey breath. No cruel smile. His hat shadowed most of his face, but his eyes were steady. Not hungry. Not mocking. Watching. The bids froze. $50. The auctioneer blinked. "Well now, that's a serious offer." Laughter died. Men whispered. "Who's that?" Someone muttered. The rancher did not answer. He did not move. The Apache woman looked at him for the first time. Her heart did not race. It did not fall. It remained still. Danger always announced itself loudly. This man did not. 60. One gambler tried, weakly. The rancher did not react. 70. Silence. Men were not willing to fight him. There was something about his stillness that cut louder than a shouted threat. "Sold." The auctioneer finally cried, slamming his hammer down. $50 to the gentleman in the back. Cheers rose from some, mocking from others. "Hope she eats you alive," someone laughed. The rancher stepped forward. He paid with a neat stack of worn bills. No bragging, no handshake, no smile. When the auctioneer motioned for men to bring the woman forward in chains, the rancher raised one hand. "Untie her," he said quietly. The men hesitated. "She's paid for," the auctioneer shrugged. "I know," the rancher replied. His voice did not change. They untied her wrists roughly and pushed her forward. Every nerve in her body screamed. Ownership. Every man she had met since her tribe fell had wanted to own her fear. The rancher did not touch her. He simply walked toward the gate. And after a moment, she followed. The Apache woman followed the rancher out of the auction gates, each step heavier than the last. The chains were gone, but fear still clung to her skin like a second shadow. She expected him to lead her to a wagon, a room, a cage. She expected ownership to begin the moment they were alone. But the rancher did none of those things. He stopped just outside the yard where a single crooked lantern hung from a wooden post, flickering like a weak star. Dust blew across the path, carrying the smell of cattle, gun oil, and dry earth. The town behind them roared with rough laughter and drunken music, as if nothing sacred had been broken that night. The rancher reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tin cup filled with water from a nearby barrel. He offered it to her. Not as a command, as a choice. She stared at it, suspicious. Poison. A trick. Her fingers hesitated, then slowly reached out. When she drank, the water tasted like the first rain after a long fire. He watched silently, not too close, not too far. When she finished, he took the cup and set it down on the post. "You are not my purchase," he finally said. His voice was low and steady, carrying no sharp edge. "You are not my property." She did not speak. Her throat felt too small for words in any language. He took a step back, lowering himself onto an old wooden crate near the path. He removed his hat, revealing streaks of gray in his dark hair. "My name is Elias Mercer," he said. "I own a small ranch west of here. No wife, no children, no reason for trouble." Still, she said nothing. "But, I do have regrets," he added. Her eyes flickered. Regret was a human word. One she understood. "I am going to untie something else," he said quietly. She stiffened. Then he walked toward the gate and spoke to a stable boy. Moments later, the boy returned with a half-empty canteen, a bottle of oil, and a thin brown blanket. Elias took the blanket and gently placed it around her shoulders, careful not to touch her skin without permission. "You can leave now," he said. She blinked. "Leave." He handed her the canteen. "The hills to the west lead into open land. Once you cross the river bend, no one will follow." Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. This was not normal. Men did not buy and free. Not like this. Not in silence. "Why?" she whispered. It was her first word since the valley burned. It sounded foreign in her own mouth. Elias did not answer immediately. He leaned against the post and looked out toward the shadowed desert. "Because," he said slowly, "once, someone else was sold while the world stood watching." Her breath caught. "My sister," he continued. "She was younger than you. Or maybe not. I never got the chance to see her grow." His fingers tightened around his hat. "She disappeared when I was 15. Lost to a town just like this. A place with too many men and not enough souls." The Apache woman listened. "Still, years later," he said, "I found her name in a ledger at a border post." A pause. Just her name, under a list of purchased people. The word burned. "Purchased. I never found her," he whispered. "But tonight, when I saw you standing there." His eyes lifted to hers. "I could not let them write another name." She looked at him, not as a captor, but as a man walking with ghosts beside him. He rose to his feet and pointed west. "This is your land now," he said. "No fences, no guards, no chains." She stepped forward hesitantly. Her body expected pain, expected a hand to grab her, expected laughter. But there was nothing, just wind, sand, freedom. Tears stung her eyes, sudden and fierce. She did not want to cry before him. She had not cried when her father fell. She had not cried when her home burned. But now the tears came without permission. She turned away sharply and began walking. Then stopped, turned back. Elias stood where he was, hands folded behind his back. Not following, not watching too closely. Just, there. She raised her hand slightly. Not a wave, not goodbye. Something older, something sacred. He bowed his head. The desert swallowed her small shape. For a long moment, Elias did not move. Then his knees gave way, and he sat on the dirt like a man who had just finished carrying the weight of a war that no one else had noticed. Behind him, the auction house still echoed. Gold changed hands. Laughter rose. Another life was priced, but one life had slipped through their fingers. And they would never even know. When Elias finally stood, the town somehow seemed smaller. Dirtier. Emptier. He walked back toward his horse without looking behind him one last time. Because he did not want to remember her as a shadow. He wanted to remember her as the shape of freedom moving into light. The desert did not welcome her. It tested her. The first night, cold bit into her bones as sharply as any blade. She wrapped the thin blanket tighter around herself and slept beneath a twisted mesquite tree. Above her, stars glittered like unfamiliar spirits. This was not the sky of her childhood valley. These stars did not know her name. But they watched her anyway. By dawn, her lips were cracked, her feet raw. Still, she walked. Each step away from the town felt like stepping out of a nightmare and into an uncertain dream. She drank carefully from the canteen and whispered to the wind in her own tongue, asking it for strength. Her name was Naya. No man had spoken it since her father died. Out here, she whispered it aloud like a prayer. Naya. The land seemed to listen. Days passed like strange, fragile gifts. She crossed dry riverbeds and thorny brush. Once, she thought she heard horses behind her and nearly collapsed in fear. But it was only wild mustangs racing toward the horizon. Free. Like her. On the fourth day, she reached the bend in. The river that Elias spoke of. The water cut like silver through the brown earth. She dropped to her knees and drank deeply, laughing and crying at once. The river was not Apache. But it was alive, and it welcomed her. She followed its edge until she found a cluster of rocks that formed a natural cave. Not large, not warm, but safe. That night, for the first time since the massacre, she slept without hearing gunfire in her dreams. Weeks turned into quiet. Quiet became healing. She learned the shape of the land the way she once knew her valley. Learned which plants healed, which berries fed, which snakes warned and which bit. Solitude became her companion. Fear slowly loosened its hold. Some days, she sang. Soft at first, then louder. The wind learned her voice. Seasons quietly rearranged themselves. Her hair grew long again. Her wounds faded into scars like stories written into skin. One morning, she woke with a strange peace in her chest. She realized something. No one was coming. Not to hunt her. Not to save her. This life was hers now. And she chose it. Far away, on a small ranch beyond the hills, Elias Mercer watched the same stars. But they did not give him peace. They reminded him of all he had lost. He returned to his empty ranch and lived the same lonely life. His animals were fed. His land gave him just enough to survive. But his heart, it remained quiet in a way that hurt. Years passed. Towns grew. Railroads cut the earth like scars. The West changed, but Elias remained a ghost within it. Sometimes, writers spoke of a woman in the hills. An Apache ghost, they said. A shadow that moved like smoke. A healer. A hunter. A spirit. Elias said nothing when he heard those stories. But when he was alone, he whispered her name to the wind. The name he did not know. He only asked the desert, "Is she alive?" The desert never answered. 10 winters later, illness came to the land. A fever swept through the ranches and mining towns. Men who once laughed at the auction hall begged for mercy under blankets soaked with sweat. Elias fell ill one night while fixing a fence. He collapsed into the dirt. His world narrowed to heat and darkness. Days blurred. He dreamed of his sister standing near a river. He dreamed of a woman walking into gold light. Then, cool hands touched his burning skin. Soft, certain. He opened his eyes to find a woman standing over him. Taller, stronger, eyes like storms held in calm glass. For a moment, he thought. "I'm dead," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "No," she said. Her English was careful but clear. "You are not." She crushed leaves between her fingers and placed them on his chest. The pain faded like fog at sunrise. "You came back," he whispered. Her eyes shifted. "I never left," she said. "I just became." She told him of the years in the wild. He told her of the years alone. Together, they filled the silence with truth instead of loneliness. When Elias recovered, he did not ask her to stay. And she did not ask him to leave. They sat by the fire and shared quiet. Equal. Free. Before dawn, she stood. "The land needs me," she said simply. He nodded. He understood now what freedom truly meant. She paused, then leaned forward and placed her hand over his heart. "Thank you," she said. He could not speak. He never saw her again. Years later, when Elias Mercer passed away, people found him sitting peacefully on his porch, facing west. One hand rested on his chest. Some swore they saw a shadow moving through the hills that night. Some claimed the wind sang a woman's song. Some said nothing, and only listened. But the desert remembered, and so did freedom.